Welcome to the Miscarriage Rebellion. I'm Sam Payne, CEO and co-founder of the Pink Elephant Support Network.
And I'm Stacey June-Lewis, counsellor, psychotherapist and broadcaster. This podcast is where we share stories of many Australians who have lost their babies to early pregnancy loss.
With evidence and empathy, we unpack the shame, blame and stigma and the lack of support that many face. This is a loss that has been silenced for too long. We deserve better.
We are here to normalise the conversation.
And we're here to make lasting change. On today's episode of the Miscarriage Rebellion, we welcome our very own Danielle Mortlock, who is Pink Elephant's Peer Support Coordinator. She has had an incredible journey, which has left her with so much empathy and understanding for our community, which is why she's a brilliant advocate and an incredible peer support coordinator. Danielle absolutely gives everything to her role at Pink Elephants, and we love having her as part of the team. I'm really grateful that you get to listen to Danielle's experience today. Danielle has had many experiences of different types of early pregnancy loss. She really has had a huge journey to have her two beautiful children. And I can't thank her enough for giving us the time to share all of her experience, all of her wisdom in today's podcast. And I really think it's a great one that you'll enjoy listening to and hopefully take a lot away from. A lot about the need for validation, empathy and support, which really is at the heart of all of our work at Pink Elephants. So thank you for listening, and let's get started with Danielle's episode all around peer support and the difference it can make to those of us who experience early pregnancy loss. So we'll dive straight in, and can you tell us about your personal experience of your losses and your journey that you've been on?
So I guess I'll start from the very start. So when in about November 2014, my husband and I found out we were having a baby. It was my first pregnancy. We decided a few months earlier that we wanted to start the process of having a family. It never occurred to me that I wouldn't have this baby in August 2015. So, we told family, we told friends, we told co-workers. There was, it was almost that the excitement couldn't be contained. I made plans straight away. And in January 2015, my husband and I went for the 8-week dating scan. So excited to see Bub on screen for the first time. The mood during that scan shifted quite quickly. I remember the sonographer saying, who told you to come in and have this scan? And I started to feel a bit embarrassed. I said, the GP suggested we have the dating scan. And she didn't say very much more. And then she ended up doing an internal ultrasound. And when she removed the probe, I noticed that it had blood on it. And she told us that she wasn't able to give us any information and sent us out to wait for the hard copy of the scans. I started to talk to my husband. I said, I think there's something wrong. And when she said goodbye, I said to her, please, can you tell me if you could see a heartbeat? And she said she couldn't find one. And so we walked out of that office. And when we were out the doors, I was holding my scans and I just broke down, and my husband and I stood outside that building. And it was just such a shock. I'd had a miscarriage. I didn't realise that Bub had stopped growing. And, it took a while for me to really believe that I wasn't going to have this baby. I wasn't given any resources. I didn't receive any sorry for your loss. I was told by the GP that it was common, that I would miscarry naturally and that I could try again. We then, after we picked ourselves up off the floor, I fell pregnant again in June 2015. And within a couple of days of seeing that positive pregnancy test, I started bleeding. I hadn't told anybody but my husband about that positive pregnancy test. And I started bleeding at work. and came home and told him I think I was losing this one. So that was a chemical pregnancy. During both those losses, I wasn't given much information in terms of what to expect when miscarrying, either physically or emotionally. I remember calling GP Access with the first miscarriage and saying, do I need to go to hospital? This is happening. I don't know how, what's normal. Is the pain normal? So I found that really difficult, and I turned to Google for answers.
Yeah, like so many women do, right?
Yeah. I had read that investigations weren't typically carried out until after 3 consecutive miscarriages, but I didn't think that mentally I could cope with going through another miscarriage and not having changed something or not trying to find an answer. I went to my GP and asked her for a referral to an obstetrician that I had heard about from a close friend. And the obstetrician that I met with, she was the first person in the medical industry to say, I'm so sorry for what you've been through. She immediately validated what I had been through. She ran some tests, and from that, she put me on baby aspirin for my 3rd pregnancy. So I fell pregnant for the 3rd time, and my beautiful boy Rory was born in October 2016. So that was more than 2 years after Mike and I had decided to start trying. That pregnancy, especially in the first 12 weeks, the anxiety was really high level. Every time I went to the bathroom, I would hold my breath. I took test after test just to try and see that positive line on the test. And at the 12-week scan, I didn't allow myself to feel any excitement until I saw him there. At 8 weeks during my pregnancy with Rory, I'd started to bleed, and Mike was away, and I rang him and I said, it's happening again. Through my obstetrician, I went to hospital and got a scan, and it turned out to be a subchorionic hematoma, and I got to see his heartbeat. So while that relieved a lot of the anxiety, it was throughout the pregnancy, it was just this feeling of hope and happiness, but there was always that niggling anxiety. Is this really going to happen? Then when Rory was 12 months old, we decided that we would try again. And I thought we had the answer. I thought baby aspirin was what I needed. Unfortunately, I had 4 more losses after Rory, including 2 more miscarriages. My 5th pregnancy ended in a miscarriage that wasn't realised until the 12-week scan. And we had seen the heartbeat at 8 weeks. I had pregnancy symptoms, and I guess I had a bit more of a false sense of security. I was also on progesterone as well, so I think I felt that I had these safeguards. And the only other time I'd seen a heartbeat was when we had Rory. My husband was away, so my parents came to the scan with me and with Rory. And we had nicknamed this bub Jellybean. The sonographer put the probe on my belly, and the grainy picture popped up on a TV screen in the corner, on a large TV screen. And my dad said, there's Jellybean. And I looked and I could see, baby's head, baby's body, legs, and one arm. And I stared at it for some time and I couldn't see that flickering heartbeat. And my mum was sitting next to me with Rory, and I said to her, Mum, can you see the heartbeat? And she just shook her head and put her hand on my arm. And I said to the sonographer, is there a heartbeat? Is there a heartbeat there? And she said, I'm just taking measurements. And I started to cry, and I thought, there was a part of me that thought, any minute now, she's going to put a hand on my arm and say, yeah, I just needed to take those measurements. It's all fine. Here's the heartbeat. But then I looked at her hand and it was shaking. And I knew then that that I wasn't going to have this baby. And she put the probe down and put a hand on mine and said, I'm really sorry, but there's no heartbeat. And I feel like every miscarriage that I went through, I dealt with it in different ways, and they were all different experiences, but I feel like that one, it broke me in a way that the previous hadn't, because I had seen that heartbeat and I felt this false sense of security. It was that was a really difficult time. I didn't feel like that I wanted to go through this miscarriage as I had with the others, and go through expectant management. So I had a D&C. It took a while for me to recover physically and emotionally from that loss. And I think not just that loss, but every loss then was just the grief from my other losses I felt would come up. I then eventually we decided to try again. And, this time I was, my obstetrician, we were trying everything. I was on Clexane injections. I was on prednisone. I was on progesterone. And I fell pregnant again. And, by this time I had been pregnant 6 times. And it was at the point where I would say to Mike, this is a positive test, but we just didn't allow ourselves any sort of excitement. Unfortunately, that also ended in loss. And following that one, I had another chemical pregnancy in August 2019. At this point, I had been pregnant 7 times and had 6 losses. And I started to wonder how much I was going to put, how much I would put myself through. I recognized that I wasn't the same person that I had been previously. Excitement over falling pregnant just was close to non-existent. And it had changed my marriage. I felt like even though I tried to hide my grief from Rory, I felt that it was having an impact on him. And I was sort of starting to consider when enough was enough, when I was going to say, I can't do this anymore. I was so grateful to have Rory. I would look at him and be amazed that he was here. And it was at that point that I found out about the Pink Elephant Support Network. So it was my mum actually that said to me one day, have you heard of this organisation? She'd found an article in the newspaper. And the moment that I looked at the website, I just felt almost like a weight was lifted, like everything that I read, I would nod along to. It was like a lot of the things that I was reading was like, yes, that's exactly how I've been feeling. I reached out and booked a phone appointment with a peer support companion, Rochelle, and I was very nervous before her call. But from the moment we started talking, it was this instant connection. She really listened to what I had to say. We talked. It was really amazing. And it just, it was so amazing to speak to somebody who really got how I was feeling. And shortly after that phone call, I found out that I was pregnant with, was my 8th pregnancy. And I had a little girl, Sophia, who just turned 3. So that's been my journey.
Thank you for sharing all of that with us. Like, so grateful for all of that sharing. I know how
Thank you for letting
it
me.
can be. Yeah.
I want to acknowledge a few things. I want to acknowledge all of your 8 pregnancies. And I want to acknowledge, the different forms of grief that I heard in that share. The grief of the pregnancy that you, I'm sure, would have imagined before you even knew this road existed. The grief of all of those babies you didn't meet. And yeah, those important shares, like the grief of your transformation of your marriage, and I guess also the grief of how you thought motherhood would be with Rory. There's so many elements of your picture that really are important to acknowledge, as well as the losses of your babies, because there's a grief and a loss in so many other elements of your being, your life, and I just wanted to really deeply acknowledge your experience in that, and also in ways that maybe wasn't acknowledged at times that we heard through your story as well.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you.
So hearing about the Pink Elephant support network and then having that conversation with Rochelle, I mean, I too was a person that found the Pink Elephant support through Sam. She contacted me, and there's almost like this kind of survival mechanism you go in on doing it on your own. Like, you might have people around you that are trying their bloody best. Sounds like you had a pretty amazing mom and particular people, but there's something that changes in the air when you start to talk to somebody that has lived this, that has walked in these shoes. So I wanted you to break down for me how that peer support maybe even specifically helped you find ways to cope, and if cope is the word that you resonate with, I suppose, or helped you in any way that you would identify.
Yeah. So I, it wasn't until 2019, after the 6th miscarriage, that I found Pink Elephants. But that, speaking to Rochelle, I mean, as you mentioned, I did have some really wonderful support around me. And I find this with a lot of the women that are part of our online communities that we talk to on live chat and phone calls, is that they can have a great support network. But there is something different about speaking to another woman who is nodding along when you're talking about what you've been feeling, and who is normalizing what you've been feeling. I remember Rochelle and I sharing the things that we did to just try and, you try all sorts of things. You give up your coffee, you give up chocolate, you give up, and, I remember we had spoken to an IVF specialist. It was one thing that we did have an appointment. You've got in your mind, like, well, if I don't have any of these things that I'm giving myself, then I don't have to think, was it that, did I have too much coffee? Did I eat something wrong?
Like a survival mechanism, like you kind of along, what's it called? It's the long game plan a bit.
Yeah, like a self-preservation, because, and certainly with the beginning of my losses, I thought, was it because was it because I jumped and did something? Was it because I lifted something? Was it, it has such an impact, I think, on your mental health, and it's such a loss of control that I think sometimes you can't help but think, I must have done something. Which we know is not true. So talking to Rochelle was just, everything that I said, she said, yes, I did that too. Yes, I thought that too. And it was the first time that I had been able to have somebody who had also experienced losses to say, yep, it's completely normal. And I think that, I was able to talk to her about the point that I was at, which was, how much longer do I put myself through this? How much longer do I put my loved ones through this? And it was great to be able to talk to her and hear that, hear what she thought about that, and that she had had similar thoughts. And I think, it just helped me know that I wasn't alone, because I had felt very alone from that first loss. I felt I had a hard time feeling like I had a right to grieve, and I felt very isolated.
Yeah.
I didn't know anybody else that was going through this like I was.
Interestingly, it doesn't stop the grief, because I think we think, and that's where a lot of the loneliness starts to integrate, is that we don't want to identify with grieving externally because we may have all of the different external factors that suggest to us that we shouldn't or don't have the right to, but that doesn't actually stop the grief.
That's right.
And so they enter this kind of isolation because it's happening regardless of whether you want to kind of push it, you want to tell people it's happening or not. It's there.
I would go to work, do my job, and cry on the way home in the car because I was by myself. I would put Rory down for a nap and then go and cry and try and just do it by myself, because I think we often feel like we're still thinking of other people. We don't want them to feel uncomfortable. And I guess I didn't, I felt that some people just thought, just get over it.
Yeah.
Get over it. At least you can fall pregnant. At least you have Rory. At least you can try again.
Absolutely. And that's how some of this, all the shame, the stigma, all of that plays into this feeling of isolation, this feeling that we grieve in private. And that's okay. Many women want to grieve in private as well. But there's also those that want to almost have their grief validated. And that's where peer support comes in. It's a safe space. It's that having somebody to have a connection with who there is no place of judgment, because ultimately they've been there too. And that's where Pink Elephants came from as well. So much of what you said about your experience with Rochelle was my experience with Gabby, that she was the first person that I connected with after my second miscarriage that didn't try and fix me. They didn't try and offer solutions, that met me where I was, and also did a lot of what you just said about, oh, I felt that too. Yeah, I understand that. That's how I felt. And ultimately that's empathy, right? Which sits at the heart of everything at Pink Elephants. I love so much about your story, and I'm so proud of so much work that you do above and beyond of what we ask for you at Pink Elephants. You really are completely driven by purpose, and it's lovely to see how far you've come with Pink Elephants. I think it would be really nice for the listeners to hear a little bit more about what your role is at Pink Elephants and how you really have come full circle now. And I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
Thanks, Sam. So after when I saw the Pink Elephants website, I immediately, I felt a connection. I felt, I don't even know how to describe it. It was just so nice to feel, I felt understood. And after I had my phone call with Rochelle, I thought, I want to be a companion. I wasn't, I knew I was coming to a time when I would, I felt that I had to make a decision soon on how much longer I would keep on going. But, I knew that I really wanted to be involved with Pink Elephants. And when I looked up what the requirements were for being a companion, which was having finished your journey and, having 12 months after your last loss, I thought, that's what I'm going to do. And so when I found out I was pregnant with Sophia, and then obviously went through a lot of anxiety during that pregnancy, we didn't share the news with most people until after 20 weeks. It just took that long to feel more confident. But as soon as I had Sophia, and then that 12 months, I was past that 12 months since the last loss, I had it in my diary. I had it written down that, this was when I was going to send the application through. So I did that and spoke to Anna and did the training, and became a peer support companion in 2021. And it just, it just felt so amazing for me to be able to have the opportunity to support women in the way that I was supported. To me, it just felt like a privilege. And it was also, I think, a way to honor what I had been through and to honor my losses. In November, the end of November last year, I became the peer support coordinator. So I look after all aspects of our peer support service. So that includes our online communities, our live chat service, and our personalised phone calls. And I've continued to maintain my role as a peer support companion. So I do still chat to women on live chat and with the phone calls. So it really has been feel like coming full circle to start as a woman who needed support and was given support, to now be supporting the women that are going through this, supporting our amazing companions that use their own lived experience to support women, and to just be a part of the organisation that was just from the moment I saw what Pink Elephants was about, it just was that weight off my shoulders.
Yeah, I think we can all relate to, having walked in these shoes and then wanting to give back in such a profound, like when I say profound, not that, well, I think what we're all doing is pretty profound, but I feel like the feeling is profound of that wanting to continue to use the experience with meaning and dignity and purpose. I really resonate. That's why we're here.
People don't talk about it, but it's happening behind closed doors, hidden behind smiling faces. There are so many people suffering in silence right now, unable to access the support that they need and deserve, simply because they don't even know that there is support available. The Pink Elephants community is made up of people from all over Australia. Some come from the big smoke, others from the bush. Some of us have heaps of friends and family around, others have none. Some have lost babies at 5 weeks. Some had ectopic pregnancies. Some had multiple ultrasounds. Others only ever saw the 2 red lines on a positive pregnancy test. But we all have something in common. We have all lost a baby. We are all bereaved parents. There are estimated to be over 100,000 of us across Australia every single year. Please help us connect with these people to give them the support that they deserve. No one should have to lose a baby and be left on their own to navigate their grief. Help Pink Elephants support more bereaved parents. Visit pinkelephants.org.au.
We resonate in that real profound feeling of wanting to make this experience mean something and be dignified and be driven into purpose and action. And I've really resonated with that why I'm here and why I do the work I do with my practice. And onto that, because now moving into this role of peer support coordinator and being so across the bereavement program that Pink Elephant support families across the country, what is it do you feel that from a peer support experience and a counselling experience, what do you feel that is a great kind of unifier in the two? Like, as a counsellor, the one-on-one experience, I know offers something, but as a peer support coordinator, why do you think it's important for them both to be available or in some cases even be merged?
Yep. So I think, with our peer support companions, they're amazing in that they are using their own lived experience to provide support and comfort and validation to women going through early pregnancy loss. I think with the Pink Elephant's bereavement support program, that's run by our incredible counsellor, Marianne, over 6 sessions. And, it covers a different aspect of the early pregnancy loss experience each session. Marianne provides information, skills, and mindfulness in each session. So I think, during, when we're going through early pregnancy loss, Pink Elephants is not only providing peer support, so somebody saying, I've been where you are, what you're feeling is normal, it's understandable, and it's valid. And then, you also have the opportunity to work with Marianne, who is saying, here are the tools that you can use. Here are the mindfulness techniques. Here are the skills that you can use while you're processing what you're going through. And, I think a further peer support is provided with the PEB sessions, because I have spoken to women who have been a participant in the PEB sessions. They will still use our peer support services. They will still use live chat. They're still part of the online communities. To me, it's just a greater, you've got more options for support depending on what you need right at that moment. And a lot of the PEBS participants form their own circle of support because they keep in touch after the program has finished, and they support each other after that program is finished. So I think it's just amazing to have all of these different support services that I think can be used together.
Mm. And I think it's also important to add that you may need different things at different times. I think we can all relate, right? Like, so one-on-one counselling, people can have the lived experience. Like, for example, I'm a lived experience counsellor, but then also that is going to be a different dynamic of relationship than somebody that is on that social kind of almost friend companion way. It's just the way that it works. Like, it's just, there is a different type of energy. And then as Marianne does in the bereavement program, there's such a psychoeducation around things that you can proactively do, which I think is a lot of where some people end up. I need to control, I need to be active in something. So it really is a whole heap of different offerings dependent on where you are in your process, dependent on where you are in your day. Could be hour to hour, it could be different. So I think it is really important to acknowledge that there isn't only one way for one person, but there's also not necessarily one way across the course of this journey, which Sam and I are really trying to avoid the word, but there it is, journey. I wanted to just also ask if you guys could just be a little, just explain to us what PEB is.
Thanks, Danielle, for explaining how counselling and peer support can come together. I mean, that's been really intentional from Pink Elephant's perspective, that we provide a varying range of services so that we meet the needs of different women and different partners, because we all have different experiences. There is no one size fits all. There is no one, again, that word journey that we need to keep coming back to. and we're trying not to. It feels like it minimizes the experience, right? And that's why. But in all seriousness, it is intentional by Pink Elephants to have several programs together. And just want to clarify that PEBS for us stands for Pink Elephants Bereavement Support Program. You can read all about that at the Pink Elephants website. It is a select program. Unfortunately, we never meet the capacity. But if you keep your eye on it, you can register when it's open if it's something that you think would be useful to yourself. I guess I want to bring it back to the women that you really are on the front line, Danielle. You hear women's stories day after day. I mean, as does Stacey within your private counselling as well. And I guess maybe even throw this question to both of you, even though this is not what we rehearsed, but around like, what are women telling you that they want to see change in their experience? What are women telling you that is still really awful about their experience? Like, and that kind of future focus, if you can both speak to that, I'd love to listen.
Yeah, so I think most of the women that I speak to express their feeling of isolation. They still feel alone, and often feel like their grief is minimized. Finding it hard to talk about their loss after a period of time, feeling like there's a time limit on how long they're allowed to grieve. We don't just hear from women who have just miscarried. We talk to or live chat with women. We see it in the online communities, women who have just got their first period after their miscarriage, that are sort of struggling with dealing with friends or family members that are announcing their pregnancies. And we also see women reaching out when they're pregnant after loss. I spoke to a woman recently, and she was trying to navigate how she was dealing with the pregnancy that she had after loss, and feeling like she should just be excited, but she had so much anxiety, and every twinge and every cramp would bring up a lot of anxiety, and she just felt that she was finding it really hard to get through each day of her pregnancy. And it was through the chat that we had that, I said to her, this is completely normal. I mentioned that we do have a pregnancy after loss online community, that the women in that group all get it, that, you can have a mixture of happiness and hope and excitement, but still feel devastated by your early pregnancy loss and so anxious that sometimes you don't feel like you can allow yourself to get too hopeful, almost like a self-preservation. I think that, the support that we offer it's so varied and it's so ongoing. It's through the early pregnancy loss journey, but after that as well. Women who have miscarried, but months after are still getting that period every month. And that's why the different communities that we have help women through each stage of that.
Yeah, I think, everything you're saying is obviously what is just softly sweeping through my rooms. I think the thing I did want to add is that I really see a lot of shock. And, obviously the word shock would be would be an obvious symbol when there is a loss, and that realization of the loss. But I think I'm talking about the shock that goes well beyond that one moment, whatever that looks like, that every person remembers. I'm talking about the shock of how maybe the picture of your life looks different. The shock of that full-on reaction that work colleague gave you, or that the shock of how 3 years later a pregnancy announcement at this particular day got you in tears. Like, I think there's so much continued shock in my clients, and that I can also personally relate to, that, is real. It's a real exhaustion to it, because shock brings surprise. It's also the longest moving energetic feeling. So it actually can take a long, long time to move through the body. So it's almost like there's tremors again of aftershocks that happen from those shocks too. So yeah, as well as obviously the initial shock of a loss, there's so much shock that happens around an infertility journey or a pregnancy loss journey. Because I think a lot of us, particularly as women, had very clear ideas of how things might be when it comes to family. We had maybe a dream of 3 kids or 2 kids, or, there's all these kinds of narratives and stories that we are encouraged to have as young women, as young girls. So then when those things unravel differently, they really do, I really do see this surprise that is separate to just the loss. It's surprise of life, surprise of this isn't how I saw it being.
Yeah. I often hear a lot of because we do obviously a workplace program, and it's often that feeling of, as girls of certain generation, you've gone through life with a Huggies advert about what childbirth will be like, what having children will be, what being a family. So those false narratives that you referred to, Stacey, as well. But also this ability to have control. We were taught of a women of a certain generation that if you work hard enough at something, you can make it happen. You can create anything. And I often worry about how that also fosters some of this self-blame and shame that comes, and how it's interconnected and intertwined, right? Because it's the first thing that really you have no control over the outcome. Danielle, you talked about it with the aspirin and the progesterone and Clexane. I've been there myself, and then had pregnancies that didn't work out, and feeling like, but I did everything I was meant to do. I didn't do this and I didn't do that. And I took this and I had this. And there really is that shock is a part of that, right? That I know I've heard it described as well. I think it's Zoe Clark-Coates, and we'll link to it in the show notes. But around the fact that she felt like she woke up in a different country and everyone was speaking a different language. And I was just, that gives me goosebumps, right? It's that feeling of, I described it as, I woke up in the sea drowning and I had no idea or way how to get through those waves. And that's kind of how peer support and counseling can help you, right? They can give you from lived experience and from skill sets how to kind of go forward. And like you said, Stacey, it doesn't remove your grief, but if we can make it that little bit easier, that's why we're here. So we're just going to bring it back. We want to ask every person who comes on this podcast one question, and we want this to be the common thread throughout, because a miscarriage rebellion is about inciting change. We want to see action around early pregnancy loss. For too long, we've suffered these journeys alone, isolated, and with a lack of validation and support. So I'm going to ask you the question, if you could wave a magic wand for bereaved parents, and if you could change anything about their experience, what would that be?
It would be that that early pregnancy loss is recognized and validated every time, even just with the words, "I'm sorry for your loss." That every time a couple goes through this, there is an immediate access to resources to learn that Pink Elephants is here, that you don't have to reach out to Pink Elephants immediately, but when you are ready, we are here waiting to support you. I think, that applies to every space where couples are finding out every day that there's no heartbeat, that they're going through a miscarriage, whether it's in a hospital, whether it's getting a scan done, whether it's at your GP, whether they're experiencing a spontaneous miscarriage at home, at work, that just across all of those paths is this recognition that this is a big deal, that it's painful, and that every couple has a right to grieve and it's valid, and that you don't have to go through this alone, that we are here. You can't take away the pain that couples are experiencing with early pregnancy loss, but you can let them know that they don't have to go through that pain alone.
That was an absolutely brilliant episode, and I really can't thank Danielle enough again for sharing all of her wisdom. I just love how full circle the episode came But Danielle found Pink Elephants via her mum and then eventually accessed our phone peer support, spoke to Rochelle, who's one of our valued peer support companions, who gave her all of the empathy and support that she was looking for. I find it quite hard to hear that she had to wait until she'd got through so many losses before she actually had access to support. And I can't help but wonder what would her journey have been like if after that first loss, Danielle had been given a referral for support to Pink Elephants. But nevertheless, that was Danielle's experience. And I'm really glad that she found us, that she connected with our peer support program, and that Full Circle is now actually our peer support coordinator. It really is a heartfelt episode that gave us so much knowledge around the journey of those that go through recurrent pregnancy loss, but also demonstrating the courage and resilience that Danielle has, and so much heart in the way that she chooses to now give back to our community. Amazing episode. Thanks, Danielle. Today's episode may have brought up some feelings for you that you need some support around. That's totally okay. Head to pinkelephants.org.au to find access to our circle of support, your safe space where you can be met with empathy and understanding throughout all of your experiences of early pregnancy loss. We're here for you. You are not alone.
If you enjoyed listening to the Miscarriage Rebellion, please help us by leaving a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. The Miscarriage Rebellion is a Pink Elephants podcast produced by our friends at 3P Studio.